People don't know why some roads haven't been used for years because some roads don't bring you back. The story I am going to tell tonight began exactly like that. My name is Daniel. I am 32 years old now. I am married. I seem to have a normal life. But every night I wake up at exactly 03:17 because that journey I went on with my friends 14 years ago is still not over. Back then, we were 18 years old. Me, Ethan, Noah, and Victor. We had grown up in a small town and were always looking for adventure during summer vacation. But Victor was different. He was quiet. Sometimes he would disappear for days and then come back as if nothing had happened. When we asked where he had been, he would only say on the old road. He never explained what he meant. One night, while sitting at the old gas station, Victor told us about the mountain road that had been closed for years. He said people didn't use that road because there was an abandoned motel at the end of it, and at night the motel lights would turn on by themselves. Ethan immediately got excited. Noah said it was a ridiculous urban legend, but Victor looked at us at that moment in a way that sent a chill down my spine, because there was fear in his eyes. Some people who went there didn't return, he said quietly, and like fools we thought it was an adventure. The next night we set off in Ethan's old car. As we moved further away from the town, the phones lost reception. The road was narrowing. We were driving through the forest and the trees looked as if they were closing in on us. Victor was silent the entire way. He was constantly looking out the window. When Ethan turned on the music, he turned it off angrily. "Don't make any noise on this road," he said. Noah laughed. "So we don't disturb the jinns." Victor didn't answer. About an hour later, we saw a rusty sign. The writing on it was almost faded, but it was still readable. Black Pines Motel, 2 km. The rest of the road was completely dark. Even the moonlight couldn't pierce through the trees. And at that moment I realized there were no animal sounds in the forest. No insects, no birds, nothing. When we arrived at the motel, the smile on Ethan's face vanished, because the motel actually existed, and it looked completely abandoned. The old building with broken windows stood all alone by the side of the road. But the strangest part was the reception light was on. The moment we got out of the car, a heavy smell of rot hit my nose. Noah said, "This place is disgusting." But Victor was staring motionless at the second floor of the motel. I looked too, and through the curtains I saw someone watching us, only for a few seconds. Then they disappeared. The moment I saw the thing looking at us through the second floor curtain, a bad feeling washed over me. Ethan must have noticed it too, because the relaxed expression on his face disappeared. "Does someone live here?" he whispered, but Victor didn't answer. He was still staring at the upper floor of the motel. It was as if he recognized someone. The wind started all of a sudden. The old sign of the motel was creaking and swaying. Noah, as usual, tried to laugh off his fear. "A perfect horror movie beginning," he said, trying to smile, but even his voice was trembling, because the atmosphere really wasn't normal. The air was heavy. Even breathing was becoming difficult. The reception door was half open. Yellow light was coming from inside. Ethan turned on his phone's flashlight and started walking ahead. As soon as we stepped inside, the smell of rot became even heavier. The tables were covered with thick dust, but there were fresh footprints on the floor. It was as if someone had walked by just a few minutes ago. "Someone is here," I said quietly. Victor suddenly spoke. "Be quiet." His state was starting to scare me, because it felt like he knew the motel better than we did, as if he had been here before. Ethan looked behind the reception desk. The old key rack was still on the wall, but only one key was missing. Room 14. Right at that moment, a heavy dragging sound came from the upper floor. Scrrrkkkk, we all froze. The sound was moving slowly down the hallway. It was as if someone was dragging a heavy object on the floor. Noah looked up in fear. "You heard that, right?" he said. Ethan laughed nervously. "It's probably an animal." But even he didn't believe what he was saying. Victor suddenly headed for the stairs. "Don't go," I said immediately, but he didn't listen to me. He started going up. We had no choice but to follow him. The second floor hallway was dark. The ceiling lights were flickering. The wallpaper was rotten and the floors were covered in water. And at the end of the hallway, the door to room 14 was open. A faint yellow light was coming from inside. Victor stood in front of the door. I saw his hands shaking. Then he said this in a whisper, "They are still here." Right at that moment, a woman's laughter came from inside the room. Noah swore and jumped back. Ethan shone the flashlight at the door. The inside of the room appeared empty. An old bed, a broken wardrobe, a rotten curtain. But in the middle of the room, an old cassette player was running, and it was spinning on its own. A distorted woman's voice was coming from the cassette. It was constantly repeating the same sentence. The road remained open. The road remained open. The road remained open. Suddenly kicked the cassette player. The sound stopped. But right at that moment, all the electricity in the motel went out at the same time. Darkness. And a few seconds later, someone appeared at the other end of the hallway. A tall silhouette of a woman. Her face was not visible, but her white dress stood out in the darkness. And the most terrifying part, her feet were not touching the ground. The moment we saw that silhouette of a woman standing at the end of the hallway, Ethan swore and backed away. The light of the flashlight was trembling. The woman's face wasn't visible because her hair fell completely over the front of her face. But she really wasn't stepping on the ground. She was floating slowly in the air. Noah screamed. "This isn't real." Right at that moment, all the doors in the motel hallway started slamming at the same time. Bang, 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 the sound was bursting our ears. The lights started flickering again. The woman, however, continued to approach us. She was silent. There were no footsteps. Only the sound of her dress dragging on the floor could be heard. Victor suddenly pulled a small metal cross out of his pocket. At that moment, we all looked at him in surprise because we thought Victor didn't believe in such things. But the fear on his face was real. "Look into her eyes," he said in a trembling voice. The woman stopped all of a sudden. Then she slowly lifted her head, and at that moment Noah screamed, because there were no eyes on the woman's face. There was only a dark emptiness. Her mouth, on the other hand, was much wider than normal. She wasn't smiling like a human. Her mouth was opened all the way to her ears. All at once, the hallway lights went completely black. The sound of running toward us was heard in the dark. We all fled toward the stairs in a panic. Ethan was leading the way. Noah almost fell, but Victor stayed behind. When I looked back, I saw that woman standing right in front of Victor, and the woman said something in a whisper. "You came again." The fear on Victor's face changed everything at that moment, because this was not his first time coming here. Victor ran toward us, shouting. We went down the stairs. When we reached the reception, the motel door had closed on its own. Ethan hit it with his shoulder, but it wouldn't open. Meanwhile, the dragging sound came from the upper floor again. But this time it wasn't just one. Multiple things were moving. SCRRKKK, SCRRKKK, SCRRKKK. Noah started crying. "We won't get out of here," he was saying constantly. But Victor suddenly went behind the reception desk. It was as if he was looking for something. He pulled old keys out of the drawers. Finally, he found a rusty photograph. There were 4 people in the photograph, and one of them was Victor. My blood ran cold because the photograph was very old. It looked at least 20 years old, but Victor was in the photograph exactly as he was today. Same face, same clothing style. When Ethan saw the photograph, he shouted, "What the hell is this?" Victor didn't answer. His hands were shaking. Then he slowly said this, "I came here before." At that moment, heavy footsteps were heard from the upper floor, but this wasn't the woman. It was much heavier. It was as if a giant was walking. The motel ceiling was shaking, and black liquid started dripping from the ceiling. Victor continued. 3 years ago, he said, out of breath, "I came with my older brother." All fell silent. Because we never knew Victor had a brother. "Only I returned from here," he said. Right at that moment, the reception telephone rang. TRRRNNGGG. Nobody moved. The phone continued to ring. Finally, Ethan picked up the receiver in fear, and all of a sudden, all the color drained from his face, because the voice coming from the phone was Victor's voice, but Victor was standing right next to us. Ethan slowly pulled the phone away from his ear. His hand was shaking. His face had gone completely white. "This is not possible," he whispered. Noah immediately grabbed the phone. "Who is this?" he shouted. Distorted static was coming from the phone. Then it really was Victor's voice that was heard, but it was older, more tired. "Open the door." Noah froze because Victor was standing right next to us, but the voice on the phone continued. "It is trying to get you out." All of a sudden, a terrifying scream echoed through the phone line. Noah threw the phone to the ground. While the receiver was shaking on the floor, Victor's voice was still repeating through the static. "Run." We all slowly turned to Victor. The expression on Victor's face had changed. His eyes looked blank. It was as if he didn't know what was happening either. Ethan backed away. "Who are you?" he asked, trembling. Victor was silent for a few seconds. Then he held his head. He looked like he was in pain. He said with difficulty. "I really don't know." Right at that moment, the heavy footsteps on the upper floor stopped. The motel fell silent, a deathly silence. Then the sound coming from the ceiling was heard. Thump, thump, thump. Someone was walking on the ceiling, but not like a human. It was as if they were moving on all fours. The sound was wandering right above us. Noah was crying from fear now. Ethan was trying to break the door down, but the door still wouldn't open. And then the old television behind the reception desk turned on by itself. There were black and white images on the screen. It looked like security camera footage. The date was written in the corner, 1998. The motel was visible on the screen. The same reception, the same place. And 4 teenagers were entering the camera frame. One of them was Victor, but we didn't recognize the other 3 people. When Victor looked at the television, his breath hitched, because the Victor on the screen was smiling. The Victor next to us, however, was trembling with fear. In the recording, the teenagers went up to the 2nd floor. Then the image suddenly distorted. The screen went black, static noise came out. And a few seconds later, when the camera showed the image again, the hallway was covered in blood. There were black stains on the walls, and none of the teenagers were in sight. There was only Victor. He was standing alone in the middle of the hallway looking at the camera, but his face wasn't normal. His eyes were completely black. Noah looked at the television and backed away. No, he was whispering. Ethan, on the other hand, grabbed Victor by the collar. "What did you bring to us?" he shouted. Before Victor could answer, the entire motel suddenly shook. The windows cracked, and that same woman's laughter was heard again from the 2nd floor. But this time, she wasn't alone. Dozens of people were laughing at the same time. The laughter filling the inside of the motel didn't sound like human voices. Some sounded like children. Some like old people, but they all had the same distorted tone inside them. It was as if they were laughing while drowning. Noah covered his ears and collapsed to the floor. Ethan was still holding Victor by the collar, but Victor wasn't looking at us. He was looking at the television, because the image on the screen had changed. The camera showed the hallway, and at the end of the hallway stood that woman in the white dress. But this time we could see her face clearly. She had no face. Her skin was completely smooth. There was no place for eyes, no place for a nose, nothing. There was only an extremely wide mouth. And as the camera slowly approached, the woman turned her head toward the camera. Then the image on the television screen suddenly turned to us, meaning what the camera was looking at was us standing in the reception right now. My blood ran cold, because the television showed our current image: Ethan, Noah, myself, and Victor. But a few seconds later, the image distorted. The screen began to show all of us dead. Ethan's neck was broken. Noah's face was mangled. I was lying on the ground covered in blood, and Victor was turning to the camera and smiling. The television exploded. Shards of glass scattered everywhere. Noah screamed. Right at that moment, running sounds started coming from the upper floor. But it wasn't just one person. Dozens of things were moving on the ceiling and walls at the same time. SCRRRKKKTHUMP thump thump scrick. Ethan finally managed to break the door down. We all rushed outside. The rain had started, but the motel didn't look normal anymore, because there were dozens of human silhouettes in the windows of the building. They were all staring at us motionlessly. As we ran toward the car, Victor suddenly stopped. We had moved forward a few meters, but he wasn't moving. He had raised his head toward the 2nd floor of the motel, and at that moment a man appeared at the window above. He was the exact replica of Victor, the same face, the same clothes. He even had the same scar. Noah started vomiting from fear. Ethan shouted, "Hit the gas!" But I was frozen because the Victor on the 2nd floor slowly raised his hand. And looking at the Victor below, he moved his lips. "Take your place." Victor next to us suddenly fell to his knees. He started screaming. He was holding his head with both hands. Then he looked at us. His eyes had turned completely black. "I never left this place," he said, crying. At that moment, I understood everything. The thing that came out of this motel years ago was not the real Victor. Something had come back with him. Perhaps it had taken his place. A terrifying scream rose from inside the motel. The Victor on the second floor walked toward the window glass. Then he slowly banged his head against the glass. Crack. He hit it again. Crack. He kept going until the glass broke. And with his face mangled, he was still smiling. Harry, no, Noah screamed and jumped into the car. Ethan started the engine. But just as we were pulling away, Victor opened the door and threw himself out. Victor, I shouted, but he was running straight into the motel. He blended into the darkness under the rain, and the motel door closed on its own. At the same time, all the lights in the motel went out. We fled from there. We drove for hours without stopping. None of us spoke. When we reached the town, it was morning, but Victor was gone. The police conducted a search. They said there was no motel at the end of that road, because such a place didn't appear on maps. But the story didn't end here. 3 days later, Ethan disappeared. Only an old motel key was found in his house. Written on it was, Room 14. Noah was admitted to a psychiatric hospital a month later. He was constantly repeating the same sentence. The door is still open, and me, I wake up every night at 03:17. Because the same sound comes from outside my room door. Thump, 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 and sometimes the yellow motel light is visible from under the door. The police never found Ethan. The case closed a few weeks later. They called it a voluntary disappearance. But I knew the truth, because the night before Ethan disappeared, he had called me. His voice sounded terrible. He was crying. There is someone in front of the door, he had said. Behind him, I heard that distorted woman's laughter. Then the phone cut off, and Ethan was never heard from again. Noah is still in the psychiatric hospital. When I last visited him, he didn't even recognize me. He was constantly staring at the corner of the room. His lips were trembling. When I got close to him, he only whispered this into my ear: the real Victor is still there. Then he started crying. As for me, I moved away from the town. I tried to get married. I tried to build a normal life, but nothing ever went back to normal. Because some nights I can smell the motel inside my house. The smell of rotten carpet, the smell of wet walls. And when it is exactly 03:17, a dragging sound comes from the hallway. SCRRKKK. Last winter, the worst thing happened. I woke up to that sound again at night. Yellow light was coming from under my door. The same motel light. I slowly got out of my bed. My heart was beating like crazy. Then from the other side of the door, I heard Victor's voice. Daniel, I froze, because this time his voice was clear. He was very close. Leave me here. I couldn't approach the door. I just held my breath and waited. Then a shadow passed under the door. The heavy footsteps moved away. And a few seconds later, the ringing of the motel phone was heard. TRRRRNNNGGG. But I didn't have a phone in my house.